All right, guys, good afternoon. Um, this is the last lesson of Chapter 8, which is Lesson 8 in writing fractions as decimals. You're going to be using pages 595 to, 600. All right, make sure you put your name. Some of you are still forgetting to put your name. And then, of course, you're going to put a staple right there where I put it. So today's lesson, we've built up to being able to write a fraction, being able to write equivalent fractions or equal fractions. We have found the least common multiples. We have found the greatest common factors. So we're going to put all this together now and writing these as decimals. So the main question is, how are factors and multiples helpful in solving problems? So that's the main question that we're talking about right now. So let's go ahead and dive into this. We have down here the average weight of a tennis racket is 2/5 of a pound. Write 2/5, this right here, as a decimal. All right. So we got to write 2/5 as a decimal. So what we have to do, and as it says here, we have to get everything with a denominator of a 10 or 100. When we did this in the last lesson, I believe, when we talked about, what was that? We drew the models. We had to have everything with a 10 or 100 underneath of it. And that's just going to help us to be able to write the decimals a little easier, okay? So we had a little practice last lesson, but now we just have the decimal. We don't color in anything or anything like that. So we're going to write 2/5 as a decimal. So we look here at this 5, and we know that has to be either a 10 or 100, right? And we're going to choose 10 because that's closest to the 5, and we know that 5 does indeed go into the 10. And we say, well, how many times do we multiply 5 to get 10? Well, we multiply it by 2, and that's where they got the 2 right here. And if you remember correctly, we have to multiply the top number by 2 just the same as what we did the bottom one, so that we get 2 times 2 equals 4. So now we have our fraction here of 4/10, okay? This is our fraction, and that is the same as saying 2/5, okay? 4/10 is equal to 2/5. It's the same fraction. We just have a denominator now of a 10 underneath of it. And as you say that, you would say 4/10. So that should help you be able to write the decimal now because you're saying it 4/10, right? And, we have, if we remember, we have our decimals. We have our first one, second, we have this is our tenths, right? Tenths place. This is our hundredths place. And then this one right here is our thousandths with a TH, thousandths place. All right. So depending on how you say 4/10, well, guess what? There's the tenths, 4/10. That's how you're going to write that in that spot right there. So we're going to write that decimal as 0.4, the 0.4 because of the 4/10 right there. And it says here that you can use the place value chart to read the decimal, and it reads 4. As you can see, whatever number that lands on, that's 4/10. So you'd write tenths right here. So the average weight of a tennis racket is, I would say, 4/10 of a pound. 4/10 of a pound. Again, the key thing here is just being able to convert the denominator, the bottom number, into a number of 10 or 100. Okay, let's look at an example of 2. So now we have one right here that we can't use a 10 because 4 does not go into 10. So that's where we're going to move it up to 100. All right, so this denominator has to be 100. So then we ask ourselves, let's see, 4 goes into 100. If we know money, we'd say a quarter, right, or 25. So we have to multiply the top one by 25 also. And then 3 times 25 is 75. So if we say that, we would say that is 75 hundredths, right? 75 hundredths. And if you remember from the last page, we had, remember this is tenths, this was hundredths. So if we write this out, 75, and then whatever the last number that it lands on, you say the end point. So you say 75 hundredths. So you'd say, you put the 0. I'm not going to count you off if you don't, but it kind of just helps in case you forget to put a decimal. And you'd say 75 hundredths, okay? Because you have decimal 75 hundredths. So you read this decimal as 75 hundredths, like that. Let's look at some more guided practice here. So we have 1/5. We have the 5 here we're going to look at. We're going to say, well, I do know 5 goes into 10, so we're going to use 10. What do I multiply 5 to get to 10? Well, that's 2. So I got to multiply the top by 2, which gives me 2. So I have 2/10. So remember, if you draw this out, this first one right here is the tenths. So you're going to say 2/10, just like that. So you're going to say 0 decimal. And then you'd write the words, read the decimal as 2/10. I'm going to be looking for that when I go through your assignment to see if you've completed this, that you have written that part right there. All right, we have 11/25 as a decimal. So I look at this 25. Obviously, that 25 is more than 10, so we're going to have to automatically go up to 100. So we have to multiply this by 4. So we got to multiply the top by 4, which gives us 44. And then 25 times 4 is 100. So now we have 44 hundredths. So again, we write this as 44, and it lands on this, which is the hundredths. So we'd say decimal 4, and we'd say this as 44 hundredths, like so, 44 hundredths. Remember, whatever the last number, this is the tenths. So you wouldn't say 44 tenths. You would say this lands on the hundredths right here. So you would say the last thing it lands on. So that's 44 hundredths is what it lands on. Okay, let's look at some examples here on the independent practice on page 597. So we said we have to get a 10 or 100. Well, this one already has a 10. So they did half the work for us, right? So you put your 0 and your decimal, and you say, well, 8/10. Well, the 8 would land here because this is the tenths place, right? So that's 8/10. You're done. That's it. Next one, 1/20. Okay, so that's higher than 10, so it means we definitely have to go to 100 up here, right? So we have to multiply 20 by 5. So we're going to multiply the 1 by 5, which gives us 5/100. Now this is a little trickier because the actual answer down here, remember, you're going to put a 0 decimal. Now remember, if we put the 5 right here, this would be 5/10. So we have no number, so we have to put 0 right there. And then we put the 5 right here because that's the hundredths, because that's what it says, 5 hundredths. So that's why we're putting the 5 right there. So 5 hundredths. So our answer is right here. Next one, number 5. Again, 20. It's more than 10, so we're going to use 100. Well, how many times do I multiply 20 to get 100? Yeah, 5, right? So we're going to multiply the 17 by 5. So 17 times 5, which is going to give us 5. It's going to give us 85. So we have 85/100. So we write our 0 in our decimal like we do for all of them. And then we write 8/5 because that 85 hundredths, this lands on the hundredths spot. Next one, again, 25. It's more than 10, so we're going to automatically use 100. So what do we multiply 25 by to get 100? That's 4. So we got to multiply this 4 up here by 4. So 4 times 4 is 16. So again, 0 decimal. And we just write it 16 hundredths because it has to be 2 place values there because this lands on the hundredths. 1/10. Hey, it's already got a 10 there, right? So put our 0 decimal. The tens place is right here, so we just put a 1 and we're done. Easy. This one, 25 is more than 10, so we're going to use 100. Okay, 25 times what equals 100? 4. So we got to multiply this 8 by 4. So what's 8 times 4? 32. So we put our 0 in our decimal, and we write 32 because it's 32 hundredths. Again, the 2 lands on the hundredths. That's why we have to write 32 like that. Number 9. Again, 25 is more than 10, so we're going to go with 100 on this one. We multiply 25 by 4 to get 100, so we got to multiply 14 times 4. If we don't know that off the top of our head, we come over here. 4 times 4 is 16. That's 56. So 56 hundredths. So again, we write 0.56 because hundredths have 2 digits. 1/4. Okay, well, 4 doesn't go into 10 evenly, right? So that means we have to use 100. And 100, 4 times what equals 100, which is 25. So 1 times 25 is 25. So again, we write 0 decimal, and then we write 25. Yeah, you have to get it with a 10 underneath, or 100, or 1,000, which we're not really talking about that right now. 20, it's more than 10, so we're going to use 100. What do we multiply 20 by to get to 100? 5. So we have to multiply the 7 by 5, which is 35. So we say 0 decimal, and we write 35. 1/25. Again, more than 10, so we're going to use 100. 25 times 4, yeah, so we take 1 times 4, which gives us 4. So that's 400. So we're going to write 0 decimal. If we wrote the 4 here, that would be 4/10, right? So we have to put a 0 here, and we're going to put the 4 here because the 4 would land on the hundredths. So that's why we would say 400ths. And you think about money-wise, that's like 4 cents. There's 100 pennies in a dollar. And this would be 4 cents of the 100, right? 4 out of the 100, that makes a dollar of the pennies. Next one, 9/10. There's already a 10 there, right? So we have to do right 0 decimal, and this is 9/10. So this is the tens place right here, 9/10. This one right here, 9/25. So if 25 is more than 10, so we have to use 100. 25 times 4 equals 100. So 9 times 4 equals 36. So we write 0 decimal 36, like so. So now we have some algebra down here. We have a missing unknown here. So we're going to have to work backwards here. All right, we have to work backwards. And basically what we're looking at is the end game, which was this right here, is actually 65 over 100. Okay. So the way I would work this out is I'd say I hate when they use G, over 20. Not 200, mine. So I would say, well, 20 times 5 equals 100. So basically, I'm going to divide 65 by 100. So I'm going to take 65 divided by 5, which gives me 5 goes into 6 one time. Subtract, you can get 1. Bring that down. 5 goes into 15 3 times. Subtract those. So your answer is going to be 13. Kind of have to just work backwards on problems like that. Same thing with this one here. This one's actually easy because you see that this is 7/10. Well, look at that. It's easy. We just know that, hey, there's going to be a 10 right there, right? And then this one here, again, this would be 18 over 100. So we have n over 50. Well, what did we multiply 50 by to get 100? That's 2, right? So what did we multiply by 2 to get 18? Yeah, 9, right? So we just had to work backwards on that one. Number 18. The smallest known female spider is 2350 millimeter long. The smallest male spider is 37 hundredths millimeter long. Write each fraction as a decimal. So we have this one right here, 23 over 50, and 37 over 100. Well, we can go ahead and write this one as a fraction because it's already got 100, right? So we just write 0, and then we write 37. That one's done. This one, well, we just basically have to have over a 10 or 100, and since 50 is more than 10, we're going to use 100. So what times 50 equals 100? That's 2. So we're going to multiply this by 2. So 23 times 2 is 46. Well, then again, we write 0 decimal 46. So that one's done. So there's your answer. There's your answer. We answered both parts, and we're finished. Evan drank 2/25 gallon of water throughout the day. Write 2/25 as a decimal. So 25 is more than 10, so we're going to use 100. What times 25 equals 100? 4, right? Times 4. So we multiply this by 4, which gives us 8. So 8 hundredths. So we're going to write decimal, or 0 decimal 8. If we wrote the 8 here, that would actually be 8 tenths, right? So we have to put a 0 in place of it. And we put the 8 right there. So that's our decimal right there, 800ths. At hockey practice, Savannah spent 19/20ths of an hour practicing. So we're going to write 19/20ths as a fraction, as a decimal. Obviously, 20 is more than 10, so we need to use 100 here. 20 times what equals 100? It's 5, so we're going to multiply this one by 5. We may have to come over here and do 19 times 5, which will give us 45 and 9. So we have 95 hundredths. So to write that as a decimal, we write 0, decimal, and we say 95, 95, just like that. All right, so down here at the bottom, let's look at this one because this is an important one to look at. It says Juliana wrote the steps below to write the fraction 18/25 as the decimal. Find her error. Well, okay, we have 18/25, 18/25. We have 18/25. We have times 2 times 4. Okay, 30. Well, I see right here, the main thing is right here, right? She should multiply by what? Yeah, by the same number. And she didn't. So she would have gotten, technically, this would have been a 4. So we would have said 18 times 4 equals 3272. So it technically should have been 72 hundredths, which would have been 0.72, which is basically double, right? She would have doubled it if she would have done it correctly. All right, so you guys' homework again on this side, don't forget on all of these, you have to, you're going to write each as a decimal. So I'm looking for a decimal in this blank. And I'm looking for some work down here where you figure it out. Like some of them, you won't have a whole lot of work like this one here because it's already got a 10. But again, if it's less than 10 and it will fit, then make a 10 as your denominator. Ones like these, you're going to have to use 100 on. All right. As we move down here to the back side of it, again, just write this as a decimal, write that as a decimal, write that as a decimal, write this. I mean, really, you're just writing all these as a decimal, right? So you just have to, and this one's a little bit tougher down here at the bottom. 9/12 says she bought 9/12 pound of sliced salami. Which of the following decimals did the scale show? Because if you think about it, you can't really put 12 into 10 or 100. So what you're going to have to do on that one first is you're going to have to simplify it first, right? You're going to 9/12. You're going to divide both of these by 3. And that will give you 3/4. Now, 4 we know goes into 100. So now you can take this and you can put it over 100 to answer that question there. All right, so if you guys have any questions, as always, my desk is always open for you, or you raise your hand, I'll come along and help you. Just make sure you have something written down on it so that I can help you. Make sure your name's on it and turn it in the box. We'll be going over this tomorrow. And thank you for watching. And again, test will be coming up on Friday over Chapter 8. So, and you can always go back and rewatch these videos. Bye.